You're not on the org chart, Morgan. You're just a technical advisor. Please remember your lane. That's what the CFO said when I flagged a security flaw in the product's payment pipeline. A flaw that, if exploited, could have tanked the entire Series A. I had the patch ready, documented, signed off by audit, but that smug weasel, grinning like his Patagonia vest, made him immortal. Just closed my tab on the shared screen and said he'd loop devs in later. I didn't argue, I just smiled. Made a note and uploaded the patch into the inactive staging environment I still controlled quietly. Because if there's one thing you learn as a woman in tech, especially one pushing 38, who's already been burned by co-founder drama, it's that silence buys you time and time, buys you leverage the truth. I wasn't even supposed to be here. 8 months ago, I was pulled back in like a ghost through a backdoor clause no one remembered writing. Clause 4.7a. Founding technical architect may be reinstated as critical systems consultant in the event of strategic restructuring. Translation: if shit hits the fan, bring Morgan back. Well, it hit hard. Their original platform was held together by Red Bull, wishful thinking, and 7-year-old AWS credits. The CEO, Brandon, had begged me to return after their launch window collapsed. Back-end failures, data leaks, user churn so high it made VCs nervous. I took the call while cooking dinner. Didn't say yes right away. Made him read the clause aloud just to hear the humility crack in his voice. Then I came back and, like I always do, I fixed it. Not with fanfare, not with slides, just clean systems, airtight compliance layers, automated risk dashboards, and a licensing model that finally passed legal review without looking like it was written by a drunk intern. If you're still listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, hey, 97% of people don't, but it keeps this madness going on, Minister of Revenge. So, give it a like, drop a sub. It really helps the team behind the scenes. All right, back to it. They handed me the flaming wreck of a company, and I built them a runway. But here's the catch. No one wants to credit the repairwoman when the plane starts flying again. They want new blood, flashy decks, a story they can pitch to funds without having to explain how the founder's ex had to duct tape the engine back together. So they started icing me out. First, my invites to sprint planning quietly disappeared. Then, Brandon forgot to include me in strategy syncs. Suddenly, I wasn't on any mailing list for the Series A prep, even though my compliance doc had been copy-pasted into the investor due diligence packet with my name scrubbed out. And when I called it out, silence. Then a miscommunication apology, then nothing. That's when the new VP of product arrived. Derek Walsh, MBA slick, hair too neat, voice like a TED Talk with a superiority complex. He shook my hand with 2 fingers like I'd handed him a wet napkin. "I've heard something about your contributions," he said, "but moving forward, let's keep it high level." "Yeah, we don't want to bore investors with code." I looked at Brandon, who just nodded along like a bobblehead with guilt. "Whatever helps," I said, and walked out. But I didn't walk far, just far enough to buy time. Because while they were busy playing politics, I was still under contract. And more importantly, I'd rewritten their infrastructure in a way that made me essential. They didn't even know how much of it I still quietly controlled. But they were about to find out. The first time I met Derek Walsh, he wore loafers with no socks and clapped after his own joke. Said something about disrupting disruption, then laughed like he'd solved global warming. Brandon introduced him with too much eye contact and not enough shame. "Derek is going to bring a new polish to our process," he beamed. "Help us level up the narrative. Narrative, not product, not infrastructure, not stability. Narrative. Translation. We're throwing lipstick on a pig and hoping the VCs are too hopped up on catered espresso to notice the snout." Derek pulled me into a one-on-one that same day. said it was a sync, but really, it was a performance review I never signed up for. "Look, Morgan, I respect the groundwork you've laid," he said, "which is corporate, for I'm about to dismiss you." Then he hit me with the punchline. "But your segment in the pitch deck, it's too in the weeds. No one wants to hear about encrypted license trees or zero trust frameworks. These investors want story vision, not a postmortem from a DevOps boot camp." He was so proud of himself. Sat back like he expected me to high-five his insight. I just blinked slowly, then asked, "And who's overseeing the risk declarations in the compliance packet?" He blinked faster than I did. "Legal? Nope," I said, and stood up. The next morning, I opened the deck folder to prep for a walkthrough with our lead investor, Nina Chen. My section, originally 18 minutes of core system walkthrough and risk audit clarity, had been gutted. 5 slides remained. One was just a stock photo of a rocket. My notes gone. Voiceover timing rewritten by Derek without telling me. I didn't rage, didn't even email. I opened a separate tab, restored my original version, and uploaded it to the hidden backup instance of the deck I maintained for exactly this kind of stunt. It was synced with the investor call link pre-authorized through my sandbox environment. Unless someone manually overrode the routing, the system would default to my copy. They didn't know that because they didn't bother to ask how any of it actually worked. Meanwhile, Brandon was off shaking hands, and Derek was doing LinkedIn self-congratulations, bragging about product leadership at the intersection of vision and execution. I swear these people treat buzzwords like seasoning. Dump on enough, and maybe you won't notice the chicken's raw. But buried in their beloved series, a term sheet, page 9, subsection 3.4, footnote C, was a quiet little clause. Product and compliance demo must include contributions from designated system architect Morgan Phillips, classified as mandatory contributor for term sheet validity. Legal language, dry, dull, deadly, the kind of thing no one reads because it doesn't have a chart or a pull. Quote, "But I'd written it, and more importantly, I'd negotiated to keep my name in that clause when I came back." They were too busy swapping slides to notice, too busy selling narrative to remember who built the damn narrative engine. So I waited, not like a deer, like a fuse. The call had that brittle, artificial cheer companies force feed into high-stakes investor demos. Everyone in suits, everyone pretending. Brandon opened with his usual nervous energy, throwing around phrases like hypergrowth, trajectory, and user velocity, which, to be clear, meant absolutely nothing. Nina Chen was already sipping from a mug that said data, or it didn't happen. Her face didn't move once. They ran through the fluff, branding, team intros, pipeline, which Derek insisted on narrating himself. He was slick. I'll give him that. Knew how to fill a slide with shiny buzzwords and make mediocrity sound like genius. But I watched his jaw twitch every time Nina asked a technical question he had to redirect. That's when my name would come up begrudgingly, like a pill stuck in his throat. And now he said with the cadence of a man handing off something he wants no part of. We'll hear briefly from our systems advisor Morgan Phillips to walk us through compliance and IP structures. I was already unmuted, slide 11, the one he'd gutted and replaced. But thanks to the backup route I'd wired weeks ago, my original deck loaded instead, and there it was, my voice oversyncing cleanly, visuals crisp, full schema in motion. The data integrity validation map populated in real time. The risk flow animation ran flawlessly. Investors leaned in. Even Nina looked up. I'd made it exactly 2 minutes in, just long enough to explain how our IP is sandboxed into license-specific sublayers, making misuse traceable and prosecution airtight. When Derek cut in, not gently, not diplomatically, just raw ego and panic. "Morgan, stop," "You're fired. Leave now, you're done here." He said it live on the call in front of every investor. No eye contact, just words delivered like a blowtorch to the throat. I didn't flinch, didn't breathe, just reached forward and closed the laptop. No dramatic pause, no speech, just a faint smile like I'd been expecting it because I had. I stood up, walked to the window of my apartment, watched a bird land on the neighbor's AC unit, then pulled out my phone and sent one text to my lawyer. Trigger clause 5.9a. No emoji, no explanation. He'd know what it meant. Back in the Zoom, I'm told. Silence bloomed like mold. One investor adjusted her glasses. Another unmuted, hesitated, then muted again. Someone typed in the chat. What just happened? Brandon froze. Derek acted like he just kicked over a chair and didn't know how to pick it back up. Their CTO, who had barely looked up the whole call, started frantically flipping through the term sheet print out in his lap. And Nina said nothing. She just lowered her mug, set it gently on her desk, and opened a PDF. Page 2, clause 1.7. And I was no longer in the room to explain what it meant, but they were about to find out. The first words that broke the stunned vacuum after I logged off came from Nina, and they weren't warm. They were clinical, razor sharp, and so calm they made everyone on that call feel the temperature drop 10 degrees. Why was Miss Phillips removed mid-presentation? It wasn't a suggestion, it wasn't curiosity, it was discovery protocol. Brandon blinked so hard, I'm surprised his contacts didn't eject. He opened his mouth and nothing came out for 3 full seconds. Then he leaned toward the camera, like proximity would somehow sell the lie better. We've been realigning strategy internally. He started, we felt it was time to, streamline stop. That was Nina. Just one word, not raised, not rushed, just definitive. She didn't even look up from the printout in her lap. Clause 1.7, she said, flipping the page once for effect. Funding is contingent on Morgan Phillips's active participation in the design, delivery, and support of all core infrastructure systems through the close of Series A. Another pause. Then, who approved this firing? The silence was the kind that makes your eardrums hurt. Brandon's face flushed. The CTO looked like he wanted to melt through his chair. Legal wasn't even in the room. Or if they were, they sure as hell weren't raising their hand. Derek, ever the frat house philosopher, shrugged like he just spilled beer on a rug. She wasn't essential, he said. We've got everything covered. That was the moment Nina took off her glasses. If you've ever seen an investor remove their glasses mid-call, you know it's not to clean them. It's not about vision. It's the calm before they open the emergency exit door mid-flight. Covered, she repeated slowly. So, the license key management, she authored. Who owns those now? Crickets, the liability schema for third-party data handling that passed audit last week. Derek blinked like she'd spoken Swahili. The compliance framework that your legal team included verbatim in the diligence packet. She leaned forward. Are you telling me none of that required her active participation? She was just technical, Brandon offered weakly. We have others who signed off on this. No answer. Because here's what they didn't get. What most men like Derek never get. They thought I was the code monkey. The quiet one in the corner typing syntax and mumbling about compliance. They didn't realize I had embedded myself like a spinal cord into every function they now relied on to pass legal, to secure data partners, to even hold the Series A term sheet together. I wasn't a node. I was the backbone. And now the skeleton had walked off. What happened next wasn't drama. It was decay. The realization spreading through every exec in that room that they had no map, no compass, and the forest fire was already burning. Derek tried again. We'll get her back on. It's just a contract issue. Nina cocked her head. You fired her live on a recorded investor call after her segment began. That's not a contract issue. That's a breach. She muted herself. Then she left the call. Not a flounce, not a tantrum, just a precision kill shot and exit. Brandon looked like someone had pulled his spine out through his ear canal. One engineer pinged Slack. What just happened? Nina rage quit. No, she didn't rage. She confirmed. Back in my apartment, my phone buzzed. My lawyer's reply. Clause 5.0 activated. Standing by. I turned off notifications. Boiled water for tea. Let them scramble. The real panic hadn't even started. At 11:22 a.m., the investment firm's legal counsel sent a single-line email to the company's internal legal alias. No greeting, no signature, just confirm Morgan Phillips's current role and system access status by 6 p.m. EST today or funding is suspended. That email hit like a lightning strike inside a termite-riddled attic. The fire didn't spread, it exploded. Brandon called an emergency leadership sync. Derek came in late, still chewing something, half smiling like it was all a clerical misunderstanding. The CTO looked pale and glassy-eyed, as if realizing in real time just how many systems had Morgan's fingerprints coded into their DNA. Legal stammered something about reviewing contracts. They hadn't even pulled mine yet. Meanwhile, IT tried to get clever. They assumed I'd be like the rest of the consultants they could freeze and reinstate with a few toggles in Okta. So, they tried re-enabling my old account. Reset password, restore roles, role access, forward. Nothing worked. What they didn't know and never thought to ask was that at 6:47 that same morning, I'd already deactivated my account from the inside because I'd built the authentication ladder myself. I knew every route, every dependency chain, every recovery loophole, and I'd rewritten the privilege thresholds weeks ago, rewriting them through a self-expiring key that once triggered revoked admin access and locked the system behind an escrowed third-party vault. They needed me to unlock it. I needed nothing. By noon, a whisper campaign had started inside Slack. Engineers were screenshotting buried commit logs showing my author stamps on major framework modules. One found a flowchart labeled Liability Exposure Proxy Layer with a note in the corner, MP, my initials, next to the compliance director's sign-off. Someone else posted a screenshot of the encrypted licensing tree. Every digital certificate for third-party integration still tethered to a root key issued under my temp credentials. Someone else posted a time-stamped PDF titled Data Handling Memo Phase 3, marked confidential, authored by me. Each file was another domino. Derek, cornered but too arrogant to feel it yet, tried to get ahead of it. He issued a company-wide message. Just to clarify, Morgan was one of several contributors to our system planning. While valuable, her work was transitional and has been fully absorbed by internal teams. He thought that would be the end of it until one engineer replied publicly to the thread. Respectfully, that's false. Half the current deployment plan links directly to her sandbox, and we still don't have access to the vendor compliance license. Legal's been asking for days. No emoji, no sarcasm, just facts. The CTO messaged Derek directly. This isn't manageable. You need to fix this now. But there was nothing to fix. Not quickly, not legally, not without me. I watched it all unfold without typing a word. Didn't log into Slack, didn't post, didn't call. They had spent 8 months treating me like a plug-and-play module. Now they were realizing I'd been the motherboard the entire time, and I'd just powered down. The board call started at 10:34 p.m. Cameras off, voices low, no preamble, just the sound of heavy breathing, paper shuffling, and the occasional clink of someone pouring bourbon into a glass. Brandon opened it with the energy of a man who'd been dragged behind a truck for 8 hours. "Thanks for joining. We've had some developments." "Understatement," growled the director of ops. "You torched our funding call midstream and terminated a named clause contributor. We're lucky Nina hasn't filed an injunction." The general counsel cleared his throat like he wished he could legally dissolve into mist. "I've reviewed the term sheet again. Clause 1.7 is non-negotiable. Morgan Phillips's involvement is not symbolic. It's structural. She's tied into every tech deliverable from Phase 1 through post-close audit. She's just one consultant." Derek cut in, voice brittle. "No, she isn't." Counsel snapped. "And if you'd read anything I sent the last 2 quarters, you'd know that. We've already breached 3 vendor agreements by losing her signature authority. 4 more will lapse in 72 hours if she doesn't authorize license handoff. We are legally cornered." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recognition. They weren't running a company anymore. They were standing in the middle of a controlled burn with gasoline on their shoes. An emergency outreach went out to me that night, sent through 3 different inboxes, 2 text messages, 1 Slack DM from Brandon himself, labeled high priority, just need to talk. I watched them all come in unread. I didn't answer. I had no reason to. They'd made their decision. I was just letting them live in it. The next day, Nina's team released a quiet inquiry to a background verification service. Standard due diligence stuff, except this time it wasn't about code or compliance, it was about character. And what they found about Derek was enough to make even Brandon's voice crack on the next call. Turns out at his last startup, one funded under Nina's smaller VC umbrella, Derek had overlooked a financial misreporting incident tied to customer churn metrics. Nothing criminal, but deeply unethical, swept under the rug during acquisition, but the report was still floating in the investor archives. Nina found it in under 7 hours. "Why wasn't this flagged in the hiring process?" someone on the board asked. Brandon had no answer. He'd vouched for Derek personally. Fraternity ties, shared trust, all that legacy garbage they love to call gut instinct. Meanwhile, my original contract finally resurfaced. Counsel read it aloud like he was narrating a war crime. "The undersigned Morgan Phillips is designated as critical consultant per section 2.0A. Furthermore, under 5.9A, Ms. Phillips retains fallback licensing rights to any IP she personally authored. Should material breach or involuntary removal occur during active funding cycles." Someone coughed. "Fallback licensing rights? It means counsel said flat and grim. She owns it. Not exclusively, but enough that we can't deploy, license, or modify any of her systems without her express consent. She built her own kill switch." "Can we reverse it?" someone asked quietly. "No. And then she really didn't tell anyone." "She didn't need to," counsel replied. "We signed it. It's on record. We just never expected her to use it." Brandon sank further into his chair. Derek had gone silent. The kind of silence that leaked sweat through your shirt. They'd built a pitch without reading the instruction manual, and now the hands that wired the entire machine had walked out with the only copy. The call with Nina was scheduled for 7:15 a.m., sharp. No calendar invite, just a short message from her executive assistant. "Ms. Chen requests a private conversation." "Direct line, no intermediaries," I answered on the first ring. "Morgan," she said, her voice cool, composed, not pretending this was friendly. "I've read every document, every commit log, every clause. I know what you did. I didn't apologize. I didn't thank her. I just said, then you understand why I left." There was a beat of silence on her end, not hesitation, respect. "I do," she said. "I also understand that this company cannot secure Series A without your consent." Another pause. I'd like to offer a solution. No titles, I replied. No team management. I'm not coming back as an employee. Nina didn't object. I want full licensing rights, non-transferable, contracted through my own LLC. I remain an external asset, not a staff member. Every line of code, every data structure I authored, stays mine unless licensed explicitly. Understood, she said. I want retroactive payment. Triple what I was promised in the original consulting contract. Full back pay, no negotiation. Done. Derek is gone, effective immediately. He resigned this morning. I want Brandon out. CEO title vacated. I don't care who replaces him, but he's done. Another breath. Board vote already passed. He's out. We're moving forward with interim leadership. And finally, I said, letting my voice rest at full volume for the first time all week. Any system or product dependent on my infrastructure moves forward only with my written approval. No overrides. I want final sign-off authority written into the license agreements for anything touching compliance, access control, or deployment. I heard her exhale, not in frustration, but like someone taking their hands off the wheel and realizing it's finally safe. Not revenge, she asked. No, I said. Control. A moment passed, then all of it done. No ceremony, no legal tug-of-war, just clean surgical execution. We ended the call without small talk. No congratulations, no great to reconnect. Just the unmistakable sound of a balance shifting. Within the hour, my new contract was in my inbox. PDF notarized, time-stamped. The transfer of IP licensing rights was formalized under a new entity I'd set up months ago. Quietly, preemptively. The logo was simple, just a single letter and a line. Because this wasn't about branding, it was about leverage. The company didn't belong to me, but its future ran through my desk now. I didn't return to the office. I didn't ask for a welcome back. They'd made that impossible. I didn't need a chair at their table. I'd built the foundation underneath it. The press release dropped at 8:13 a.m. on a Tuesday, buried under a wave of fintech funding headlines. But anyone paying attention felt the shift. The title was Polished PR Nonsense, Leadership Restructure, and Strategic Realignment. But the subtext was blood in the water. No quotes from Brandon, no mention of Derek, just a sterile paragraph announcing an interim leadership team and new compliance-led oversight practices. The kind of language that only surfaces after someone with real power says, clean house. Now, internally, the reactions split. The old guard, those who'd played ping-pong with Brandon and laughed at Derek's pitch deck puns, either clammed up or quietly jumped ship. The engineers. They started unarchiving old threads. Threads with my name on them. Threads that now read like prophecy. Meanwhile, Derek deleted his LinkedIn in the middle of the night. His last post, a smug selfie with the caption, "Building Legends from the Inside," was gone, scrubbed. No goodbye, no announcement, just digital vapor. Brandon, ever the coward, didn't even offer an exit interview. According to Slack whispers, he told the board he needed a mental reset and fled to some forest-drenched wellness retreat in Colorado, where rich men pretend yoga can erase failure. He's probably journaling in a yurt right now, writing affirmations about reclaiming founder energy. And me, I didn't show up, not physically. My return came through a shell entity, TPX 19 Solutions LLC. No logo, no employee list, just one binding function. Exclusive licenser of all infrastructure code authored by Morgan Phillips between Q1 and Q3 of the current fiscal year. Every system that mattered, it now operated under a sublicensed key through TPX 19. Access required my sign-off. Deployment required my signature. The company couldn't push an update without my green light. They didn't even get to say my name anymore, just our external compliance architecture partner. Let them explain that on their org chart. The first investor call post-chaos was delicate. Cameras on, smiles too wide, acting like the building hadn't just been fumigated from the inside out. Nina led it with calm precision, laying out a new roadmap filled with phrases like maturity framework and risk-aligned growth. Then halfway through, she said, "And now we'll return to the technical compliance overview led by our licensed systems architect." She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. I unmuted the waveform pulsed. "Let's proceed from slide 11. I said, voice even unaffected where I left off. And then I spoke, clean, sharp, just facts. No preamble, no emotion, just structure, assurance, and exactly the kind of language that makes venture capitalists feel like their money's been blessed by a deity with a legal pad. When I finished, I clicked mute. No one said a word. Not Nina, not the interim CEO, not the investors. Not a single throat cleared or keyboard tapped. It was the kind of silence that isn't awkward. It's reverence. Not for me, but for control. Because they all understood now, this wasn't my comeback. It was my confirmation. The girl they fired, she never came back. The woman on that call, she never left. It's late, not midnight late. Just that soft, breathable hour when the streets start folding into themselves and no one's in a rush anymore. I'm at a corner cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and a barista who doesn't judge how long you linger. The tea is lukewarm. The lighting is amber. My laptop hums quietly beside a half-eaten almond tart I forgot I ordered. I'm not in an office. I don't need to be. I check my inbox. No rush, just habit. The latest investor report is sitting there stamped and final. Series A confirmed oversubscribed, even Nina's firm doubled their position. The board voted to make external compliance oversight permanent, and buried in the appendix there it is in print. All infrastructure systems currently under license to TPX 19 Solutions, with final technical authority, retained by Morgan Phillips. No press release named me. No internal memo welcomed me back. They wouldn't dare, not after what happened. But the paperwork speaks louder than the posturing ever could. I open the term sheet again. Page 2, Clause 1.7, the one they skipped over, the one no one thought mattered. It's still there, unchanged. Funding contingent on Morgan Phillips's active participation. Funny thing about clauses, people only care when they break them. I'd built it like a landmine. Buried, dormant, silent. Until someone stomped hard enough to set it off. My phone buzzes. It's a number I recognize but haven't saved. I don't need to. The message is short. You made your point. You're in charge now. I stare at it for a moment. No emoji, no signature, just reluctant surrender written in the language of cowards. I don't reply. What's there to say? I close the laptop, lean back in the chair, and sip my tea. It's gone cold, but it's quiet here. Clean. No pitch decks, no Slack pings. No one telling me to make myself smaller so their egos can fit in the frame. They cut my mic.